In our newest, koi varieties, we are continuing with the single-colored koi varieties, such as the white Shiromuji koi from the last video post, by looking at the benegoi koi, which is a red, single-colored. Benegoi koi are non-metallic, solid red or orange koi fish. The name benegoi literally translates as red koi. You may have noticed that in the koi keeping hobby, there are a few different Japanese terms meaning red, the most common of which is hi. This koi variety is called benegoi rather than higoi, because the ideal color of the koi is an orange-red, which is associated with the word beni, rather than the deep, fiery red associated with the word hi, such as on a kohaku koi. The benegoi koi variety was one of the original koi varieties, first popularized in the early 1920s. The variety began with the megoi carp, which was a black wild carp common in Japan, in the 18th and 19th centuries. Around the beginning of the 19th century, wild carp started to become pets, rather than purely food, and there is when koi keeping started to become a hobby. Many of the early koi varieties came about as a variation or a mutation of the wild carp, and the benegoi is no exception. In fact, the very first variation of the wild carp seen by the carp farmers was the red-bellied megoi. By selectively breeding pairs of wild megoi that each have small amounts of red coloration on their underside, farmers were able to produce a megoi with a purely red belly, the appropriately named red-bellied megoi. This red-bellied megoi was then bred with the kohaku koi, a white koi with a red pattern, to produce a pure red fish, the benegoi. A true benegoi koi will have red or orange coloration over the whole body of the fish, including the fins and tail, but some benegoi fish have white tips to their fins and tail. This is a rare subvariety of the benegoi variety, called benegoi hajiro, and is very high in demand, making it a very valuable koi variety. The name, hajiro, refers to a black koi with white tips on its tail and fins, so the name, benegoi hajiro, describes the fish as a combination of the red coloration of the benegoi koi with the white pattern of the hajiro koi. This subvariety is very rare because, although it is common to see a benegoi with white tips to the fins, or a white tip to the tail, it is very difficult to reliably breed a koi with both of these, and to have all of the white be perfectly positioned. In fact, many breeders avoid even trying to produce benegoi hajiro koi, because they are so difficult to breed, and because poor benegoi hajiro koi are also poor benegoi koi, so there are a lot of culls required for very few good quality fish. For many breeders, it makes more sense to breed good quality benegoi than even try to breed benegoi hajiro koi. When judging a benegoi koi, or indeed any single-colored koi, the most important consideration is the quality and consistency of the color. While other varieties may have brighter colors, interesting patterns, or even differences in their fins or scales, the benegoi is a much simpler koi, with just the one color and no pattern. This, however, means that this color is the first thing people see, and must be perfect in any good benegoi. Just like most other single-colored koi, a few different shades of red are acceptable, with each koi keeper having their own personal preference. As with many koi, but especially single-colored koi, the consistency of the color determines the best koi. This is because, in single-colored koi, there are no bright patterns, or contrasting colors, to draw the eye. Instead there is just the one color, which should be perfect all over including the body, head, fins and tail, and, in general, the more consistent the color of the fish, the better the quality of the koi. Any deviation in shade is considered an imperfection in the fish. Of course, for a benegoi koi, the shade of the beni is important too. Generally, any shade of deep orange or red is acceptable, but the best shade is considered to be a deep orange red, just dark enough to be clearly red instead of orange, but light enough to still have a hint of orange coloration. As with many single-colored koi varieties, benegoi koi have a slight reticulation pattern in their scales, called fukurin, which is visible as a slightly darker tint at the top of each scale. This tint continues over the whole scale, but with a gradient effect, so that the darker color is not covering the bottom of the scale. With the variety, the fukurin pattern is a darker red color, so the pattern gives the fish the appearance of having darker red scales, outlined with a lighter orange red. Of course, some fish will show this much better than others, with many only having a hint of fukurin that is very hard to see, and others not displaying the pattern at all. If the benegoi does have a visible fukurin pattern in its scales, it should be as even and consistent as possible. Each scale should be arranged neatly and in even rows, while the thickness of the reticulation should be equal across all of the scales. The color of the fukurin pattern is less important, as different koi keepers prefer different shades. A darker fukurin color will give each scale a very distinct outline, while a lighter color will give a more subtle effect. Again, however, consistency is key. Every scale should be the same color and should X, as any scales with a different fukurin color will be immediately obvious. Benegoi koi are a great addition to any pond. With the vibrant red coloration, they're sure to always stand out and be noticed in any group of koi.